Jake Morrison had been stationed on the human embassy vessel orbiting the planet Valoria for 8 months when the ornate invitation arrived. The diplomatic courier delivered it personally, a shimmering holographic card that projected images of sweeping crystal spires and bioluminescent gardens. The text, translated into flawless English, invited Ambassador Morrison's entire staff to attend the royal wedding of Princess Sorella, daughter of King Theron, to Duke Vex of the Northern Territories. Jake was just a junior cultural liaison, fresh out of the Interstellar Relations Academy. He had never expected to attend anything more glamorous than a trade negotiation dinner. His supervisor, Ambassador Claire Hayes, seemed equally surprised by the scope of the invitation. The Valorians are extending this to everyone, even junior staff, Claire explained during the briefing. This is unprecedented. King Theron wants to strengthen ties with humanity. And apparently, he believes, including all of us, demonstrates his sincerity. Jake studied the holographic invitation as it cycled through images of the upcoming celebration. The Valorians were a proud species. Tall and elegant, with luminescent skin that changed colors with their emotions. Their culture valued honor, tradition, and grand displays of unity. A royal wedding was the social event of the decade. "Do we need to bring gifts?" asked Linda Park, the embassy's trade specialist. "The cultural database suggests that attending is gift enough," Claire replied. "However, small tokens of Earth are appreciated. Nothing too extravagant. Think symbolic, rather than valuable." Jake spent the next week preparing. He selected a small glass sculpture of Earth's moon, handcrafted by an artist from Luna Colony. It seemed appropriate, a representation of humanity's first step beyond their home world. He also agonized over what to wear. The invitation specified formal attire, but human formal and Valorian formal were very different concepts. The day before the wedding, the embassy staff boarded a shuttle to the planet's surface. Jake pressed his face against the viewport as they descended through Valoria's violet-tinged atmosphere. The capital city of Lumina spread below them like a jewel, its towers catching the light of the system's twin suns. They were greeted at the royal spaceport by a delegation of Valorian courtiers, their skin glowing a welcoming shade of soft gold. The head courtier, whose name translated roughly to "keeper of honored guests," bowed low. "We are delighted to welcome the humans to our celebration," the courtier said, their voice musical. "You will be housed in the east wing of the palace, where accommodations have been prepared according to your biological needs." The palace was beyond anything Jake had imagined. Corridors of living crystal refracted light into countless rainbows. Gardens grew both above and below, defying gravity in ways that made Jake's head spin. Their quarters were comfortable, with beds that adjusted to human body temperature and air composition tailored for earthborn lungs. That evening, there was a pre-wedding reception. Jake donned his formal suit, a midnight blue ensemble that he hoped struck the right balance between respectful and distinctly human. The reception hall was filled with guests from a dozen different species. Jake recognized some from his training: the insectoid thresh, the aquatic Nyrim in their mobile water tanks, and the crystalline Vex. He found himself standing near a fountain of liquid light, sipping something the servers called star wine. When he first saw her, she stood across the hall, surrounded by courtiers but somehow apart from them. Her skin glowed a soft, shifting pattern of blue and silver, and she wore a gown that seemed woven from starlight itself. When she laughed at something one of her companions said, the sound carried across the room like wind chimes. "That's Princess Sorella," Linda whispered, appearing at Jake's elbow. "The bride-to-be. Beautiful, isn't she?" "Stunning," Jake agreed, not taking his eyes off her. As if sensing his gaze, the princess looked up. Their eyes met across the crowded hall. Her skin flickered through several colors rapidly. Something Jake's training told him indicated surprise or strong emotion. Then, one of her attendants spoke to her, and she turned away. Jake spent the rest of the reception trying not to stare, with limited success. He mingled politely, made small talk with various guests, and tried to learn more about Valorian wedding customs. He learned that the ceremony would last 3 days, with different events honoring different aspects of the union. The first day for the joining of families, the second for the blessing of the community, and the third for the binding of souls. As the reception wound down, Jake made his way back to his quarters, his mind full of swirling thoughts. Tomorrow, the wedding would begin. He was just a guest, an observer, from a distant world. He had no idea that everything was about to change. Part 2. The ceremony begins. The first day of the wedding ceremony began at dawn. When Valoria's twin suns painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, Jake joined the rest of the embassy staff in the Grand Assembly Hall, a vast space with a ceiling that seemed to reach into infinity. Thousands of guests filled the terraced seating, representing worlds and cultures from across the known galaxy. The ceremony opened with traditional Valorian throat singing, a harmonic sound that resonated in Jake's chest and made the air shimmer. King Theron entered first, his skin blazing gold with paternal pride. He was a towering figure, even for a Valorian, and his presence commanded immediate respect. Behind him came Princess Sorella, and Jake felt his breath catch. She wore ceremonial armor crafted from silvered scales that caught the light with every movement. Her skin cycled through colors that Jake's cultural training identified as representing joy, duty, and anticipation. She moved with the grace of a dancer, each step deliberate and meaningful. Duke Vex entered from the opposite side of the hall. He was imposing, his skin a deep, constant crimson that spoke of military background. His armor was darker, more practical, studded with medals and honors from various campaigns. He looked every inch the warrior noble. The joining of families ceremony involved an intricate exchange of oaths and gifts between the two houses. Jake watched, fascinated, as generations of history and alliance were woven together through words and symbolic gestures. But something felt off. He noticed that Princess Sorella's skin flickered frequently to a muted gray, a color his training told him indicated distress or resignation. During the midday break, the embassy staff gathered in one of the palace gardens for refreshments. Ambassador Claire looked thoughtful. "Did anyone else notice the princess seems less than enthusiastic?" she asked quietly. "Arranged marriage," Linda said, nodding. "I researched it. Royal Valorian marriages are political alliances. Love is considered a pleasant bonus, but not a requirement." Jake felt an unexpected surge of anger at this information. He had no right to feel anything about the princess's emotional state, but the idea of her being forced into a marriage troubled him deeply. The afternoon brought more ceremonies. These focused on the histories of both families. Singers recounted great deeds and honored ancestors. Jake tried to pay attention, but his eyes kept drifting to Princess Sorella. Twice more, their gazes met. Each time, her skin flickered with those same rapid color changes, and she looked away quickly. That evening, there was another reception, less formal than the first. Guests mingled freely, and Jake found himself wandering through one of the palace's night gardens. The plants here glowed softly, creating an ethereal landscape of blues and greens. He was admiring a flower that pulsed with light in rhythm with his heartbeat when he heard footsteps behind him. "You are one of the humans," a musical voice said. Jake turned to find Princess Sorella standing a few feet away. Her guards remained at a discreet distance, far enough to give the illusion of privacy. Up close, she was even more striking, her skin now glowing a soft, curious purple. "Yes, Your Highness," Jake said, bowing as he had been taught. "Jake Morrison, Cultural Liaison to the Human Embassy." "Jake Morrison," she repeated, seeming to enjoy the sound of the foreign name. "What do humans believe about marriage?" The question caught him off guard. "Well, we believe many things, Your Highness. Our cultures vary widely, but many humans believe marriage should be based on mutual affection and choice." Her skin shifted to a wistful blue. "Choice," she said softly. "What a luxury." Before Jake could respond, one of her attendants approached. "Your Highness, the king requests your presence." Sorella nodded, then turned back to Jake. "Thank you for your honesty, Jake Morrison. It is rare in a place like this. She left, and Jake stood alone in the glowing garden, his heart pounding. He had just spoken with the princess. More than that, there had been something in her eyes, a connection he could not define but could not deny. The second day of ceremonies focused on community blessings. Representatives from every district of Valoria came forward to offer words of support for the union. It was beautiful and tedious in equal measure. Jake noticed that Duke Vex seemed impatient, his skin occasionally flashing an irritated orange when he thought no one was watching. During one of the ceremony's natural breaks, Jake excused himself to use the facilities. He was walking through a quiet corridor when he heard raised voices behind a partially closed door. He should have walked away, but he recognized one of the voices as Princess Sorella's. "I have done everything you asked, Father. Everything. But this, I cannot pretend to feel. What? I do not." King Theron's voice was firm but not unkind. "You will learn to respect him, daughter. Love may follow in time, or it may not. And I will have bound myself for life to a man who sees me as a prize, not a person. Vex is a good match. He secures our northern borders and unites two powerful houses. I know the political reasons. I have known them since I was a child. That does not make this easier." There was a long pause. Then the king spoke more softly. "If you truly cannot do this, daughter, I will not force you. But know that there will be consequences. The alliance with the northern territories is fragile. Without this marriage, we may face war." Jake quietly moved away before he could be discovered eavesdropping. His mind raced. The princess did not want this marriage, but she was trapped by duty and the weight of potential conflict. He felt helpless and angry, emotions that had no outlet. That night, he could not sleep. He stood on the balcony of his quarters, looking out over the glowing city, when he heard a sound. Turning, he saw a small messenger drone hovering near him. It projected a hologram, a simple map marker, in the same night garden where he had spoken with Sorella the previous evening. Jake knew he should ignore it. This was none of his business. He was a junior diplomat at an alien wedding. But he found himself pulling on clothes and slipping out of his quarters, following the silent corridors to the garden. She was waiting by the same glowing flower, her skin a swirl of conflicted colors. "You came," she said, sounding surprised. "You sent for me, Your Highness." "Sorella," she corrected. "When we are alone, please call me Sorella." "Sorella," he repeated, and even saying her name felt significant. "Why did you ask me here?" She looked up at Valoria's 3 moons, hanging large and bright in the sky. "Because you are the only person in this entire palace who has spoken to me as if I have a choice, and I needed to hear that voice again, even if only for a moment." They talked for hours that night, sitting among the glowing flowers like 2 conspirators. She told him about the weight of royal duty, about growing up knowing her life was not entirely her own. He told her about Earth, about a world where people were still learning to reach the stars, about a culture that valued individual freedom even when it led to chaos. "What must it be like," she mused, "to be able to choose your own path?" "Terrifying," Jake admitted. "And wonderful. And sometimes wrong. But it's yours." As the first sun began to lighten the sky, Sorella rose reluctantly. "I must go. The final day of ceremonies begins soon." "Sorella," Jake said, standing as well. "What if you just said no?" She smiled sadly, her skin flickering to a color he had not seen before, something that looked like hope mixed with fear. "Perhaps in another life, Jake Morrison. In another life." She left him alone in the garden, with the growing certainty that he was falling for someone completely beyond his reach. Part 3. The Challenge. The third and final day of the wedding ceremony was meant to be the most sacred. The binding of souls. Jake took his seat in the Grand Assembly Hall with a sense of dread. Today, Sorella would be bound to Duke Vex in a union that Valorian tradition held to be unbreakable. He told himself he had no right to feel this way, no claim on her affections. They had shared a few conversations, nothing more. And yet, the thought of watching her pledge herself to another made him feel ill. The ceremony began with a ritual cleansing, where both bride and groom were anointed with water from the sacred springs of Valoria's first settlement. King Theron presided, his skin glowing with ceremonial gold paint that marked him as both king and high priest for this occasion. "We gather today to witness the binding of souls," Theron announced, his voice carrying through the hall. "Once these vows are spoken and the ritual completed, these two shall be joined for all their days. Does any among the assembled have cause to speak against this union?" It was meant to be rhetorical, a traditional question that had not been answered in living memory. In the silence that followed, Jake felt his heart hammering. He thought of Sorella's words in the garden, of the resignation in her voice. He thought of the Valorian tradition, of arranged marriages, of duty over happiness. He stood up. The entire hall turned to stare. Thousands of eyes, in dozens of different configurations, focused on the human who had just committed a massive breach of protocol. Ambassador Claire looked horrified. Linda grabbed at his sleeve, but Jake gently pulled free. "I have cause to speak," Jake said, his voice somehow steady despite his shaking hands. King Theron's skin flashed through several colors, finally settling on a deep, ominous purple. "Yes, Your Majesty. You understand what you have done? By invoking the right of challenge, you have called into question the legitimacy of this union. You must now present your cause before all assembled, or face grave consequences." "I understand, Your Majesty." Jake walked down the long aisle toward the dais where Sorella and Vex stood. Sorella's skin had gone completely white with shock. Vex looked murderous, his crimson deepening to near black. "Speak, then," Theron commanded. "What cause do you offer?" Jake took a deep breath. "Your Majesty, I claim that this marriage does not honor the spirit of Valorian tradition. Your culture values honor, and there can be no honor in a union where one party does not give their heart freely. Princess Sorella does not love Duke Vex, and he does not love her. This is a political arrangement disguised as a sacred bond." The hall erupted in chaos. Voices overlapped in a dozen languages, some outraged, some curious. Theron raised his hand, and silence fell immediately. "These are grave accusations, human. Do you have proof?" "I have the princess's own words, Your Majesty. She told me herself that she does not wish this marriage." All eyes turned to Sorella. Her skin flickered through rapid color changes, finally settling on a defiant silver. "It is true, Father. I have tried to honor my duty, but Jake Morrison speaks the truth. My heart is not in this union." Vex stepped forward, his voice a growl. "This is outrageous. Am I to be humiliated before the entire galaxy because some alien has filled the princess's head with romantic nonsense?" "You speak of humiliation, Duke Vex," Jake said, surprised by his own boldness. "But what of the humiliation of binding yourself to someone who will never truly be yours? What honor is there in that?" Theron held up his hand again. "Enough. Jake Morrison, you have invoked an ancient right, one I cannot dismiss regardless of how I might wish to. However, invoking the right of challenge requires that you offer an alternative. Do you claim that this union should not happen at all, or do you claim it for yourself?" The question hung in the air. Jake felt the weight of every gaze in the hall. This was the moment. He could back down, suggest that Sorella be given time to reconsider, or he could take the leap into the unknown. "I claim it for myself, Your Majesty. If Princess Sorella will have me." The hall exploded in noise again. This time, it took longer for Theron to restore order. When silence finally fell, the king's expression was unreadable. "You understand what you claim, human? You, an alien from a world we have known for less than a decade, claim the right to marry the heir to the Valorian throne?" I claim the right to offer myself, Your Majesty. The choice, of course, remains with Princess Sorella. Theron turned to his daughter. Sorella? She looked at Jake, her skin cycling through colors that he could not read. Emotions too complex for simple translation. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong. Jake Morrison has shown me more respect in 3 days than I have been given in 3 years of planning this marriage. He asked me what I wanted. He listened when I spoke. If you grant me the choice, Father, I choose him. Vex roared his outrage. This is madness. I will not stand here and watch some primitive alien steal what is rightfully mine. The princess was never yours, Vex, Jake said quietly. She's her own person, not a prize to be won. Vex moved fast, drawing a ceremonial blade from his belt. Valorian guards rushed forward, but Vex was already lunging at Jake. Time seemed to slow. Jake saw the blade coming, knew he could not dodge it, and thought how absurd it was to die at an alien wedding on a world so far from home. The blade never reached him. Sorella moved faster than Jake thought possible, her own ceremonial blade meeting Vex's with a ringing clash. She disarmed him with a twist of her wrist that sent his weapon clattering across the floor. You forget yourself, Duke, she said coldly. We are in the presence of the king, and you have drawn steel in the sacred hall. Your alliance is ended. Vex looked around, seeming to realize what he had done. His skin flushed with shame, and he dropped to one knee. Your Majesty, I lost control. I apologize. You are dismissed from these proceedings, Theron said, his voice like ice. Guards, escort Duke Vex from the palace. We will discuss consequences later. As Vex was led away, still protesting, Theron turned back to Jake and Sorella. His expression softened slightly. Daughter, you understand that if you choose this human, there will be complications? The alliance with the Northern Territories is broken. There will be political consequences. I know, Father. But perhaps those consequences would have come anyway. Vex showed his true nature today. Better we learn it now than after a binding. Theron nodded slowly, then looked at Jake with an appraising expression. Jake Morrison, of Earth, you have courage. I grant you that. Possibly more courage than sense, but you have shown honor in your willingness to speak for one who could not speak for herself. Very well. By the ancient right of challenge, I grant you permission to court my daughter, with the possibility of marriage should you both wish it. Court? Jake said, the weight of what he had just done beginning to sink in. Your Majesty, I thought. You thought you could simply marry her today? Theron's skin flickered with something that might have been amusement. No. Young. Human. You have prevented one marriage, but to claim another requires that you prove yourself worthy. You must undergo the trials of the suitor, ancient tests designed to show your compatibility with my daughter and your fitness to potentially join the royal family. What kind of trials? Jake asked warily. Sorella's skin glowed with what was definitely amusement now. Tests of character, courage, wisdom, and heart. They are not easy, Jake Morrison. Many Valorian suitors have failed them. And if I fail, then you return to your embassy, and I remain unwed for the time being, Sorella said. But Father will not force me into another arranged marriage. Not after today. Jake looked at her, at the hope in her eyes, at the possibilities suddenly open before them. He thought of his quiet life as a junior diplomat, of the safe and predictable path he had been on. He thought of Earth, of everything familiar and known. Then he looked at Sorella again and knew his choice was already made. I accept the trials, Your Majesty. Theron's skin glowed with approval. Then, let it be so. Jake Morrison of Earth, you have 3 cycles of Valoria's moons to complete the trials of the suitor. May fortune favor you. As the assembly dispersed in excited chatter, Jake found himself surrounded by the embassy staff. Ambassador Claire looked somewhere between proud and concerned. Jake, Do you have any idea what you've just done? Not entirely, he admitted, but I had to try. Linda laughed, shaking her head. You came here as a wedding guest and ended up the groom-to-be. That's gotta be a diplomatic first. Jake looked across the hall to where Sorella stood with her father, deep in conversation. She caught his eye and smiled, her skin glowing a warm, hopeful pink. I haven't won anything yet, Jake said. I still have to pass these trials. You'll pass them, Claire said with surprising confidence. Anyone crazy enough to stand up in front of the entire galaxy and challenge a royal wedding probably has what it takes. Jake hoped she was right. Because now, having taken this leap, failure meant losing something he had only just found. The possibility of a future with someone who made him feel alive in a way he never had before. Part 4. The Trials. The trials of the suitor began the following morning. Jake barely slept, his mind racing with questions about what lay ahead. When dawn broke over Valoria, he was summoned to the courtyard of Proving, an ancient space at the heart of the palace where countless suitors had tested themselves throughout Valorian history. King Theron stood at the center of the courtyard, along with a council of elders whose skin bore the faded patterns of great age. Sorella was there too, though she was required to observe in silence. She gave Jake an encouraging look, her skin flickering with soft, supportive colors. Jake Morrison, Theron began, his voice formal and ceremonial. The trials of the suitor are threefold. First, the trial of mind, where you must prove your wisdom and understanding. Second, the trial of body, where you must prove your courage and strength. Third, the trial of spirit, where you must prove your heart and character. You may face these trials in any order you choose, but all must be completed before the third moon rises on the final night. Do you understand? I understand, Your Majesty. Then choose your first trial. Jake thought carefully. Physical courage might be his weakest area, given that Valorians were naturally stronger than humans. He should tackle that last, when he had momentum. Wisdom seemed like a good starting point. I choose the trial of mind, Your Majesty. One of the elders, an ancient Valorian whose skin was nearly transparent with age, stepped forward. The trial of mind requires you to solve the puzzle of thrones. You will be taken to the Chamber of Histories and given a scenario based on real events in Valoria's past. You must determine the correct course of action that honors both justice and mercy, wisdom and pragmatism. You have until sundown. Jake was led deep into the palace, to a chamber whose walls were carved with countless scenes from Valorian history. A holographic display activated, showing him the scenario. 200 years ago, the elder's voice explained. Valoria faced a drought that threatened to destroy the southern provinces. The king had resources to save only one region, either the agricultural heartland, where the king had regions to Bass, which fed the majority of the population, or the southern mining territories, which provided the rare minerals essential for Valorian technology and defense. Saving the farmland would feed the people, but leave Valoria vulnerable to enemies. Saving the mines would maintain defense, but cause widespread famine. As the king's advisor, what counsel would you give? Jake sat in the chamber, surrounded by holographic projections of suffering farmers and desperate miners. It was an impossible choice. The kind that had no perfect answer. He thought about it from every angle, running through scenarios and consequences. Hours passed. The twin suns moved across the sky, casting changing light through the chamber's high windows. Jake considered dozens of solutions, discarding each as flawed. Finally, as the suns began their descent toward the horizon, inspiration struck. When the elder returned at sundown, Jake presented his answer. I would advise the king to save the agricultural heartland immediately, ensuring the population survives. But simultaneously, I would recommend he open diplomatic channels with allied worlds, trading Valoria's artistic works, cultural knowledge, and other non-essential goods for the minerals needed to maintain defense. Additionally, I would suggest implementing water conservation techniques that humans developed during Earth's own resource crises. The drought will end eventually. Until it does, Valoria must rely on cooperation and innovation rather than choosing between two vital needs. The elder's skin flickered through several colors. You offer a solution, not present in the original scenario. You change the rules of the problem. Respectfully, Elder, the scenario assumes isolation and limited options. But Valoria has always been part of a larger community of worlds. Wisdom means recognizing when to ask for help. The Elder was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, his skin glowed a warm gold. The historical King Theron III eventually reached a similar conclusion, though it took him months and cost many lives. You have passed the trial of mind, Jake Morrison. But know this: the answer we seek is not always the clever one. Sometimes, wisdom lies in accepting hard truths. I understand, Elder. Thank you. As Jake left the Chamber of Histories, he found Sorella waiting in the corridor. Protocol dictated she should not speak to him during the trials, but she reached out and briefly touched his hand as he passed, her skin glowing with pride. It was a small gesture, but it gave him strength for what came next. The second day, Jake chose the trial of body. He was taken to the Arena of Champions, a vast space where Valorian warriors had tested themselves for generations. King Theron explained the trial. You must face 3 challenges of physical prowess. You need not win all 3, but you must show courage in each attempt. The challenges are these: the climb of doubt, where you must scale the crystal spire without safety equipment; the run of endurance, where you must complete the warrior's circuit in under 1 hour; and the combat of honor, where you must face one of our warriors in ritual combat. Jake looked up at the crystal spire, a glittering tower that stretched hundreds of feet into the air. He thought of the run of endurance, designed for beings who were naturally faster and stronger than humans, and the combat of honor against a trained Valorian warrior. He would be demolished, but he had not come this far to back down now. The climb of doubt came first. Jake approached the spire, studying its smooth, glassy surface. Valorians could scale it using the subtle texture variations their sensitive hands could detect. Jake's human hands were clumsy by comparison, but he had one advantage. He had grown up rock climbing in the mountains near his home on Earth. He began to climb, finding holds that seemed impossible, using techniques of balance and momentum that Valorian observers did not expect. Twice, he slipped and caught himself at the last moment, his heart pounding. The crowd gasped, Sorella's skin flashing white with fear. But Jake kept climbing, drawing on reserves of determination he did not know he possessed. When he reached the top of the spire, the gathered Valorians erupted in cheers. His arms shook with exhaustion, but he had done it. He planted the banner that marked his success and carefully made his way back down. The run of endurance nearly broke him. The warrior's circuit was 2 miles of obstacles designed to test every aspect of physical fitness. Jake pushed himself beyond his limits, his lungs burning, his legs screaming in protest. He finished in 1 hour and 14 minutes, failing to meet the time requirement. But the fact that he completed it at all earned him respectful recognition. Finally came the combat of honor. His opponent was a warrior named Kex, a veteran of many campaigns with skin scarred by battle. They faced each other in the center of the arena, armed with training weapons that would hurt but not cause permanent damage. The combat was brief and brutal. Kex was faster, stronger, and far more skilled. Within minutes, Jake was on his back, Kex's blade at his throat. But Jake had not given up. He had fought with everything he had, taking hits that would have felled a lesser human and continuing to strike back. Kex helped him to his feet, his skin glowing with respect. You fight with honor, human. You know you cannot win, yet you do not yield. That is the mark of a true warrior. King Theron descended from his viewing platform. Jake Morrison, You have completed one challenge fully, struggled valiantly through another, and fought with honor in the third. The trial of body is not about perfection. It is about showing courage in the face of obstacles. You have passed. Jake, bruised and exhausted, felt a surge of relief and joy. 2 trials down, 1 to go. The third day brought the trial of spirit, which Jake had saved for last. He was taken to the Garden of Reflections, a peaceful space filled with trees whose leaves sang in the wind. King Theron and the Council of Elders were there, along with Sorella, who now was permitted to participate. The trial of spirit is the most important and the most difficult, Theron explained. You must face truths about yourself and about the path you have chosen. Princess Sorella will ask you 3 questions. You must answer with complete honesty, holding nothing back. The elders and I will judge whether your spirit is true. Sorella stepped forward, her expression serious. When she spoke, her voice was gentle, but firm. Jake Morrison, first question. Why do you seek to marry me? Is it for love? For adventure? For the status of joining a royal family? Or for some other reason? Jake took a deep breath. This was the moment for complete honesty. When I first saw you, I was captivated by your beauty. That's true, and I won't deny it. But what made me stand up in that ceremony was not attraction. It was seeing someone trapped by duty, unable to speak for themselves, and knowing that silence would haunt me forever. Do I love you? I don't know yet. We barely know each other, but I see in you someone I could love. Someone I want to know better. I seek to marry you because I believe we could build something real together. Something based on choice and mutual respect. And yes, part of me craves the adventure of it all. I was living a safe, predictable life. You've shown me something more. Sorella's skin flickered with colors. Jake was learning to read. Appreciation, vulnerability, hope. She nodded and asked her second question. If we marry, you will live here on Valoria, far from your home world. You will never be fully Valorian, always seen as the alien who married into the royal family. Some will resent you. Some will question you. Can you bear that burden? I won't pretend it will be easy, Jake said. I'll miss Earth, miss my family, miss things about my old life. There will be days when I question this choice, but I believe that a life worth living is not always an easy one. Yes, I can bear that burden, especially if I have you beside me. The third question came, and Jake saw Sorella's skin darken with the difficulty of asking it. If, after we marry, you find that you do not love me, or that the life here is too hard, or that you made a mistake, will you tell me the truth? Or will you stay out of duty as I would have done with Vex? This was the hardest question. The one that cut to the core of everything. Jake thought about it carefully before answering. I promise you this, Sorella. I will always tell you the truth about what I feel. If I struggle, I will tell you. If I have doubts, we will face them together. But I will not abandon you simply because things are hard. Marriage, from what I understand, is about building something together, through both joy and difficulty. However, if I truly came to believe I had made a mistake, that we were both suffering rather than growing, yes, I would tell you, because staying out of misplaced duty would be the same trap you faced with Vex, and I would not do that to either of us. Sorella's skin glowed with a color Jake had never seen before, something that seemed to shine from within. She turned to her father and the elders. He speaks with honesty and wisdom. His spirit is true. The elders conferred among themselves, their skin colors shifting as they debated. Finally, the eldest stepped forward. Jake Morrison of Earth, you have passed all 3 trials. You have shown wisdom in recognizing that problems can be solved through cooperation. You have shown courage in facing challenges that tested the limits of your physical abilities. And you have shown true spirit in answering with honesty, even when the truth was difficult. We grant our blessing to this union, should you both choose to proceed. King Theron placed a hand on Jake's shoulder, his skin glowing warm gold. Jake Morrison, you have earned the right to marry my daughter. But know this, the trials do not end here. Marriage itself is the greatest trial of all. Are you prepared to face it? Jake looked at Sorella, at the hope and fear and possibility in her eyes. He thought about everything that had led him to this moment. From receiving that invitation to standing up in the ceremony, to climbing the crystal spire with shaking arms. Yes, Your Majesty, I'm prepared, Theron nodded. Then, in 3 days' time, we will gather again in the Grand Assembly Hall. And this time, there will be a wedding that celebrates choice, not duty. A union that honors the spirit of our traditions rather than simply following their form. As the gathering dispersed, Sorella approached Jake. For the first time since he had met her, they were permitted to be alone together, without guards or protocol between them. You did it, she said softly, her skin glowing with joy. You actually did it. We did it, Jake corrected. You're the one who answered my question truthfully in the ceremony. You're the one who had the courage to reject a path that others expected you to follow. She reached out and took his hand, the first time they had truly touched. Her skin was warm and tingled slightly, a sensation both foreign and wonderful. Are you afraid? She asked. Terrified, he admitted, but also excited, also hopeful. Also, about a dozen other emotions. I don't have names for. She laughed, the sound like music. That seems appropriate for someone about to marry an alien princess. Former wedding guest. Jake reminded her. Don't forget that part. I came here for the appetizers, and I'm leaving with a whole new life. They stood together in the Garden of Reflections as Valoria's 3 moons rose in the darkening sky. 2 people from different worlds who had found each other in the most unlikely way possible. The future was uncertain, full of challenges they could not yet imagine. But for now, in this moment, they had hope, and sometimes, hope was enough. Part 5. The True Binding. The 3 days between the completion of the trials and the wedding ceremony passed in a blur of preparation. Jake found himself swept up in a whirlwind of Valorian customs and protocols, learning everything from the proper way to address members of the royal court to the symbolic meanings of various ceremonial gestures. Ambassador Claire and the embassy staff helped when they could, but much of this was territory Jake had to navigate alone. The night before the wedding, Jake stood on his balcony, looking out over the glowing city of Lumina. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to find his father, Richard Morrison, stepping out onto the balcony. His parents had arrived from Earth just 2 days earlier, traveling at faster-than-light speeds to witness their son's impossible wedding. Can't sleep? Richard asked, joining Jake at the railing. Too much running through my mind, Jake admitted. Dad, did you ever doubt your decision to marry Mom? Were you ever scared you were making a mistake? Richard laughed softly. Every single day leading up to the wedding. And you know what? I still have moments where marriage scares me. 30 years later. But being scared doesn't mean you're making a mistake. It means you understand the weight of what you're choosing. What if I'm not ready for this? Jake, nobody is ever ready to get married. Not really. You can prepare all you want, learn all the customs, follow all the protocols, but at the end of the day, marriage is about 2 people choosing to face the unknown together. That's terrifying and beautiful in equal measure. Jake nodded, drawing comfort from his father's words. She's incredible, Dad. Sorella, the more I get to know her, the more I realize how lucky I am that she's giving me this chance. And I'm sure she feels the same about you. You stood up in front of thousands of people and challenged a royal wedding for her. That's not something you forget. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the moons move across the sky. Finally, Richard spoke again. Your mother and I are proud of you, son. Not because you're marrying a princess or because you passed some alien trials. We're proud because you saw someone who needed a voice and you chose to be that voice. Even when it cost you everything comfortable and known. That takes real courage. Thanks, Dad. That means a lot. Richard clapped him on the shoulder. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow's a big day, and you don't want bags under your eyes in the ceremony photos. Your mother will never let you forget it. Jake did manage a few hours of sleep, though his dreams were full of climbing spires and answering impossible questions. When dawn broke, he woke to find his room filled with Valorian attendants, ready to help him prepare. The ceremony would begin at midday. When both suns were at their zenith, the embassy staff had worked with Valorian tailors to create a ceremonial outfit for Jake that blended human and Valorian aesthetics. The result was striking. A formal suit in deep blue that echoed Earth's oceans, with silver embroidery that mimicked the patterns of Valorian skin when glowing with joy. He looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. "You clean up nice, Morrison," Linda said, arriving to check on him. She wore a formal dress for the ceremony, her role as a witness and honor the Valorians had granted the embassy. "Ready to become a prince? I'm marrying Sorella." "Not becoming a prince," Jake corrected, though he knew the title would technically apply. "And yes, as ready as I'll ever be." The walk to the Grand Assembly Hall felt both endless and far too short. This time, instead of sitting in the audience, Jake stood at the center of the hall. On a raised platform beneath that impossible ceiling, the space was filled with even more guests than before. Representatives from hundreds of worlds come to witness this historic union between a human and a Valorian royal. King Theron stood as officiant, his skin glowing with ceremonial gold paint. The Council of Elders flanked him, their ancient faces serene, and then, from the far end of the hall, Princess Sorella appeared. She wore a gown that seemed woven from starlight and ocean waves, colors that shifted and flowed with her movement. Her skin glowed with patterns Jake had learned meant joy, hope, and love. But it was her eyes that held him, clear and bright and certain. She walked toward him slowly, savoring each step. When she reached the platform, she took his hands in hers, and Jake felt that tingling warmth again. Stronger now. "We gather today," King Theron began, his voice carrying through the vast space, "to witness a union that represents not just the joining of two individuals, but the bridging of two worlds. Jake Morrison of Earth and Princess Sorella of Valoria have chosen each other, not out of duty or political necessity, but out of mutual respect and the possibility of love. This is the true spirit of binding, a choice made freely, with eyes open to both the joys and challenges ahead." The ceremony incorporated traditions from both worlds. There were Valorian vows spoken in their musical language, promises of honor and partnership that made Sorella's skin glow brighter. There were human vows, too, adapted for this context. For better or worse, in joy and sorrow, as long as we both shall live. When it came time for the exchange of rings, a human tradition Jake had requested be included, he slipped a simple silver band onto Sorella's finger. She placed a ring on his hand as well, one made from Valorian crystal that would glow faintly in rhythm with his heartbeat, always reminding him of this moment. "By the authority granted to me as King of Valoria," Theron announced, "and with the blessing of the ancestors and the assembled witnesses, I declare you bound in spirit, heart, and soul. Jake Morrison and Princess Sorella, you are now united in marriage." The hall erupted in cheers, the sound like thunder. Sorella pulled Jake close and kissed him, her skin blazing with colors that needed no translation. Jake kissed her back, aware of thousands of eyes on them but caring only about this moment, this person, this choice he had made. The celebration that followed lasted 3 days, echoing the original wedding timeline but with joy instead of obligation. There was feasting and music, dancing that blended Valorian movements with human styles in chaotic and wonderful fusion. Jake danced with his new wife, with his mother, with Ambassador Claire, and even with King Theron, who proved surprisingly light on his feet. On the second night of celebration, Jake and Sorella managed to steal away from the festivities, escaping to the night garden where they had first really talked. The glowing flowers pulsed with gentle light, and the 3 moons hung bright in the sky. "Do you regret it?" Sorella asked, settling onto a bench beside him. "Everything you've given up to be here?" "Do you regret it?" Jake countered. "You've scandalized half the royal court, broken an important political alliance, and married an alien who still can't pronounce half the words in your language correctly." She laughed, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Not for a moment, but I asked you first." Jake thought about it seriously. "I miss Earth sometimes. I miss the way coffee tastes there, and the sound of rain on a roof, and a dozen other small things. But regret? No. I chose this, Sorella. I chose you, and I'd choose you again. Even though it's hard sometimes? Especially because it's hard sometimes. If it were easy, it wouldn't mean as much." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the moons move across the sky. Finally, Sorella spoke again. "I've been thinking about what you said during the trials. About building something together. I want that, Jake. Not just a marriage of convenience or duty, but a real partnership. What did you have in mind?" "I've been talking with Father. The alliance with the Northern Territories is broken, yes, but that creates an opportunity. What if we focused on building stronger ties with other worlds instead? You understand human culture, and I understand Valorian politics. Together, we could be ambassadors, bridges between species." Jake felt excitement stirring. "You mean like a diplomatic mission?" "More than that. A new initiative focused on cultural exchange and mutual understanding. Father has agreed to fund it, and several other worlds have expressed interest. We would travel, meet with different species, help facilitate connections and partnerships. It would be challenging and sometimes difficult, but it would be ours," Jake finished. "Something we build together. I love it." Sorella's skin glowed with happiness. "Then we have a purpose, you and I. Not just a marriage, but a mission. Ambassador Princess and her human husband, traveling the galaxy and annoying royals everywhere," Jake said, grinning. "I can think of worse fates. Rabbity. In 40. Rabbity. Rabbity. Much worse," Sorella agreed, kissing him again. The final day of celebrations included a formal reception where Jake and Sorella met with representatives from the various worlds that had attended. It was during this reception that Duke Vex approached. Escorted by guards, his skin was muted, showing shame and contrition. "Your Highness, Jake Morrison," Vex said, bowing low. "I have come to offer my formal apology. My behavior at the original ceremony was inexcusable. I allowed pride and anger to overcome honor. I hope in time you can forgive me." Sorella studied him carefully. "You hurt Jake and disrupted a sacred ceremony, Vex. Those are not small things." "I know, Your Highness. I have spent these days in reflection. I realize now that you were right, both of you. A marriage without mutual regard is hollow, no matter how politically advantageous. I was so focused on the alliance and what I believed I was owed that I forgot to consider your happiness. That was wrong of me." Jake extended his hand. "Apology accepted, Duke Vex. We all acted from passion that day. What matters is what we do moving forward." Vex shook Jake's hand, his grip firm, but not crushing. "You are generous, Morrison. I hope you will be happy together." As Vex left, King Theron joined them. That took courage on his part. "Perhaps there is hope for the Northern Territories yet." "Father, about that," Sorella began, and proceeded to outline the diplomatic initiative she and Jake had discussed. Theron listened thoughtfully, his skin shifting through contemplative colors. "This is ambitious," he said when she finished. "And potentially dangerous. You would be traveling to worlds where humans are unknown, where Valorians are sometimes mistrusted. There would be risks." "We know," Jake said, "but we think it's worth it. The galaxy is changing. More species are making contact with each other every year. Someone needs to help facilitate those connections, to smooth the way and prevent misunderstandings. Why not us? I have. One. Theron looked at them both for a long moment. Then his skin glowed with pride. Why not indeed? Very well. I give you my blessing. And Valoria's support. Go forth and build bridges. Ambassador Princess and Prince Consort. Make Valoria proud. The celebrations eventually wound down, and life began to settle into new patterns. Jake moved into the royal quarters with Sorella, learning to navigate the complex social structures of the Valorian court. There were challenges daily. Moments when he felt completely out of his depth, times when the weight of what he had chosen pressed down on him. But there were also moments of joy. Morning conversations over breakfast, where Sorella taught him more about Valorian history, and he shared stories of Earth. Evening walks through the palace gardens, their fingers intertwined. Late-night planning sessions for their diplomatic initiative, their heads bent over star maps and cultural databases. 6 months after the wedding, Jake and Sorella departed on their first official mission, traveling to the Thresh homeworld to help negotiate a trade agreement. It was challenging work, requiring patience and creativity and constant adaptation. But they did it together, each bringing their unique perspective and skills to the table. As their ship traveled through the starlit void between worlds, Jake stood at the viewport, watching the universe slide by. Sorella joined him, slipping her arm through his. Any regrets yet? She asked, the question becoming their private joke. Not a single one, Jake replied, and meant it. Only that I didn't meet you sooner. They stood together in silence, two people from different worlds who had found each other against all odds. The future stretched before them, full of unknowns and challenges and possibilities. But whatever came, they would face it together. The human man who had gone to an alien wedding as a guest and left as a bridegroom, and the princess who had chosen love over duty. And somewhere in the cosmos, on a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable star, Jake Morrison's name was added to the diplomatic records, with a footnote that would puzzle historians for generations. Attended alien wedding. Married the princess. Currently traveling the galaxy as an ambassador. Status. Living happily ever after. It was, by any measure, the best wedding gift anyone could ask for.